Said my lord to my lady as he mounted his horse, beware of long Lankin that lives in the moss.
Greetings, Folk Files listeners, and welcome to an unsettling, late October exploration of folk music. If you've been listening to each episode as it comes out, then this installment may come as a surprise. 2 episodes in October? Why, of course. I had to talk about the bogeyman of the Child Ballads for Halloween. And also, I fell behind and didn't record an episode in September. Oops. In the background, you can hear Martha Wainwright and Lucy Wainwright Roche singing the featured song for this episode, Long Lankin, a song that also goes by Cruel Lincoln, False Lamkin, and many other names. The story of Long Lankin was first written down in 1775 by Thomas Percy, who is well known for his collection of ballads and songs known as The Relics of Ancient English Poetry. Percy learned the tale from Reverend Parsons of Wye in Kent, who wrote it down after hearing it from one of his female parishioners, so it's likely older than its written record. Over the course of this episode, we'll discuss the potential historical roots of the song, its many versions, and its possible meanings. First, let's start with the general plot and all the major deviations. Most versions of Long Lankin, or at least most English versions of the song, start with a warning being issued from a lord to his lady. He says some variation of "Beware of Long Lankin." Many versions suggest that Lankin lives in the wild. For example, I titled this episode Beware the Moss after Steeleye Span's version of the song, which forebodingly says, "Beware of Long Lankin that lives among the gorse. Beware the moss, beware the moor, beware of Long Lankin." It feels like a classic horror scenario. Keep the doors and windows locked tight because you can't trust what might come out of the wild darkness. Despite assurances from the lady, or in some cases the omniscient narrator of the song, that all the doors are bolted and the windows pinned, Long Lankin still manages to creep in through a small window. Is he some strange slender man? A malevolent relation to Santa Claus who can squeeze himself through gaps into your home? Lankin goes to where the lady of the house's baby, or at least one of her babies, is sleeping. In a couple of the kinder versions, Lankin pinches the baby to make it cry and lure the mother down. In less kind versions, the baby is pricked with needles and pins. In the worst versions, the baby is eventually killed through this bloodletting, but not before, obviously, screaming its lungs out. The mother is concerned for her child, and this is where the role of the nurse varies greatly. I surveyed about 20 to 30 versions of the song, and most of the time, the nurse is an accomplice to Lankin. Sometimes she even lets him in at the window and leads him to the baby. In these false nurse narratives, the mother calls down to the nurse to wake up and calm down her baby. The nurse explains that she's tried everything. In English versions, she'll say she's tried milk and pap. In American versions, it's sometimes breast milk and pie. In any case, the nurse has tried everything, and the baby will not be quiet until the mother comes down. The lady protests, saying that it's a cold night and she has no way to light her descent. The nurse responds that the lady has plenty of silver mantles or silver dresses that will light the way. I was interested in this part of the story because unless there was a very bright moon, in which case she wouldn't need the silver dresses or mantles to begin with, silver wouldn't be much help in lighting her way. I began to wonder if the kind of people who originally composed this song, or perhaps the ones who originally composed the verses about the silver mantles, had never seen silver in the dark. There is a lot about this song that suggests it was not composed for the nobility, and this is just one hint. If someone were not familiar with silver, then they might think that it shone as brightly in the dark as it did when there was a light source nearby. Once the lady descends and sees Long Lankin ready to kill her, there are some variations where she tries to bargain with him. I'll get into that a little later because it's almost more disturbing than the murders. But nothing can save the lady from Lankin's bloodlust in the end, and she is killed. But we don't know exactly how she's killed. The song essentially gives us a fade to black and simply describes the state of the house afterwards. As the song tells us in a line that is shared by most of the versions I could find, there was blood in the kitchen, there was blood in the hall, there was blood in the parlour where the lady did fall. A couple folk music scholars point out that this is the line that's possibly the most jarring in the jauntier major key versions of the song, as you can hear in this soundbite from Martin Carthy.
There's blood in the kitchen, there's blood in the hall, there's blood in the parlour where my lady did fall.
How cheery. In versions where there isn't a false nurse, sometimes we have instead the lazy nurse. The lady calls out to the nurse to check on the baby, and the nurse is the one who says, "How do I dare go down in the dead of night with no fire a-kindling or no candle alight?" What? That's literally your job. So, instead, the nurse leaves her employer to stumble down in the dark and be murdered. In some variations, the lord of the manor is flagged down by a maid or by his daughter Betsy, who tells him what Lankin has done. The song usually ends with the promise that Long Lankin has been or will be hanged at the gallows, and when the nurse is his accomplice, she is burned at the stake. It's a ghoulish tale, but I couldn't help thinking who the intended audience for this ghost story would be. Because while the noble family are the victims, and so it's tempting to think that perhaps this is a strange cautionary tale for the nobility to keep their houses shut up tight or not to leave their wives alone unguarded, there are many elements that suggest that the ruling class would not like this song. Just going off the plot points we've discussed already, in most versions, the lady of the house is very reluctant to tend to her baby. The casual neglect does not paint the mother in a very positive light. Far worse than that, however, is how she begs for her life. Listen to this verse from George Fradley.
You can have my daughter Betsy, so young and so sweet. You can have as much money as the stones in the street. I don't want your daughter Betsy, or the stones in the street. I would rather see your life's blood rolling down at my feet.
She offers Long Lankin her daughter Betsy. To kill instead? To marry? For more despicable reasons? It's unclear. But it turns the lady of the house into a cowardly, cruel figure. In some of the American versions of the song, when the lord bids his lady farewell and warns her about Long Lankin, he says, "He'll be here at noon." If the lord knew exactly when this monstrous creature was coming, wouldn't he stay behind to guard his wife and child? Or perhaps he would take her and the baby with him to town. Nope. Instead, he runs off, leaving his family to be murdered. When introducing the plot, I mentioned that this was the standard narration for the English versions of the song. But the Scottish versions, and some of the American ones, give us the full story. Listen to the first verse from Geordie McIntyre.
Lamkin was as good a mason as ever hewed a stane. He built Lord Loudon a castle, and payment got nane. The Lord said to the lady, ere he gaed abroad, beware all Lamkin that lives in yonder wood.
Long Lankin wasn't just a random boogeyman from the moss. He was a stonemason who built a castle for the lord and was never paid for it. No wonder he was able to sneak into the house. He built it. As Anne G. Gilchrist argues in her Lamkin, A Study in Evolution, the folk process made it so that in Scotland, the song is mainly about Lamkin, the wronged mason. And in England, the song is about Lankin, the border ruffian. I like the way that Tim Cumming of Songlines words it. that while the Scottish versions give the full story, south of the border, that context dissolves like a mist, leaving the stark landscape of motiveless horror. With the extra information from the Scottish versions, we now have a motive for the horror. But is it a good motive? Frank Proffitt of North Carolina, who sang the song as Bo Lamkin, has this to say. I want to say that I never gave much thought to Bo Lamkin's feelings until I too got to building. It seems he got angry because pay he got none. I have had an occasion or two of this kind, not much, I am glad to say. I don't claim that I had murderous intent, but how I would have liked to take a big stone hammer and undone the work that pay I got none for. Now, I want to make this very clear. I do not condone murder in situations where you haven't been paid for your work. But I think it's important to realize that this wasn't a little building job that Lankin wasn't paid for. This wasn't a few weeks or months of his life. This was a castle. Very coincidentally, my friend recently married an Irish stonemason who was hired by a delightfully eccentric client to build a castle. The mason made it clear to me that this job was going to be the pinnacle of his career and was going to take years to complete. I can only imagine what kind of mood he would be in if, at the end of this Herculean feat of masonry, he didn't receive a penny. I did a little research into castle building, and depending on the size of the structure, the number of men involved, and the sturdiness of the materials, before the modern age, stone castles would have taken 2 to 10 years to build. Some people believe that Long Lankin is based on a true story, and that the Lord and Lady's house is a 15th century tower structure, either Balwearie Castle in Scotland or Welton Hall in Northumbria. Some folk historians believe that the story is based off a real man named Lord Weary, and that it was his daughter and grandson who were killed by Lankin, who was either a stonemason, as the song suggests, or a well-known robber from Lonkin's Hall, another 15th century Northumbrian tower house. But, as often happens when trying to corroborate folk legends like this, all attempts to find historical documents about Lord Weary kept leading back to the Long Lankin song rather than any records. It's possible the story is about the Weltons, a family with ties to Northumbria, but I couldn't find any historic mentions of grisly murders. But if Lankin was a real mason, he likely spent 2 to 10 years of his life building this castle, and given the fact that the Lord was a cheapskate, he probably didn't have a very large team of men, pushing that estimate towards the higher end. So it's a little more understandable why Lankin would be seething with murderous rage. Not acceptable, of course, especially considering he goes after the Lord's family rather than the Lord himself, but understandable. With this extra context, I wonder if the song may have started as a cathartic, bloody fiction for the working class. Surely many of them wanted to murder their employers for ill treatment. They couldn't, of course, but maybe their invented boogeyman Long Lankin could do it for them as a fantasy. It's a messed up idea, but it's a healthier outlet than actual murder. It would also explain why so many of the tunes are so jaunty and fun.
Said the Lord to the lady as he mounted his horse, beware of Long Lankin who lives in the moss. Said the Lord to the lady as he rode away, beware of Long Lankin who lives in the hay. Let the doors all be bolted and the windows all pinned, and leave not one hole for a mouse to crawl in.
That was Alasdair Roberts and Friends. Now, let's talk a little bit about the name of the titular character. I mentioned that there are many different versions of the name, and one of the most common ones is Lamkin, which is also perhaps one of the most ironic, since a sweet little baby lamb is about as far from a bloodthirsty murderer as you can get. Some have speculated that he's called Lamkin because he was actually an extremely mild-mannered mason before he became enraged through lack of payment. Another theory is that it's simply a last name. Lamkin is a pretty common name in Northumbria, which is said to come from a man known as Lamkin Flandrensis, who came to England from Flanders in the 12th century. It's thought to be the Flemish form of the name Lambert. The Flemish connection is interesting because Flemish stonemasons are documented as having frequently worked in England, according to folklorist Frank Warner. There's even a pattern of brickwork called Flemish bond that became particularly popular in England in the 17th century, based on a style used throughout the Netherlands. Philips Barry, a scholar of traditional ballads, found a version of the song where the murderer is called Linfin. He claimed that Linfin in Gaelic means white man who lives by a stream. But I couldn't find that name anywhere, and breaking it down into parts, it seems to be unrelated to any of those words, white, man, stream, and instead seems to mean something closer to we would or us something. If I have any Irish scholars listening, please correct me. In any case, Philips Barry thought about how Lankin was perhaps an unnaturally pale or white man, and hypothesized that the mysterious Lankin was a leper. Kenneth S. Goldstein claims that in Irish folklore, lepers could be cured by the blood of a person collected in a silver bowl. This would explain the recurring image of the bowl or basin catching the spilled blood in many of the versions of the song.
So he pricked him all over with a pin, and the nurse had the basin for the blood to flow in.
That was a performance by Lisa Knapp. While I couldn't find anything to back up Goldstein's claim about blood in silver bowls, I found a lot of bizarre old myths about how to cure leprosy, including many involving blood. In Leviticus, it suggests using the blood of a bird to cure skin diseases. In ancient Greece, blood was considered an appropriate treatment, either to be bathed in or drunk. In some cases, the treatment required the blood of an innocent, either a child or a virgin, in order to ritually cleanse the body. Paracelsus suggested using lamb's blood to cure leprosy, and there are also records of blood from freshly dead bodies being used. The last record of blood being used as a cure for leprosy is from 1790, where an alchemical text mentions dog's blood being used as a treatment. Before continuing, I think it's important to do a quick PSA about leprosy, because it is a very different disease from what has been portrayed in popular culture. Leprosy is also known as Hansen's disease, and it is not highly contagious, and it does not cause your body parts to fall off. It is a bacterial infection that, thankfully, is highly treatable today. Most people are actually immune to the bacteria, and it can only be caught through prolonged close contact, basically enough contact so that respiratory droplets can be exchanged. One of the earliest signs of leprosy is pale patches on the skin, which is why Philips Barry connected white man who lives by the stream with leprosy, and it can cause skin lesions and numbness, which, left untreated, can lead to disfigurement or the need for amputation. But before 1940, there was no reliable treatment, and as has been unfortunately frequently documented, lepers were social pariahs because of their disfigurement and supposed contagion. This could explain why Long Lankin lived in the woods rather than in town. But it wouldn't explain why he would be trusted to build someone's house. Also, leprosy causes muscle weakness. I'm not sure how successful someone could be as a stonemason if they suffered from weak muscles. Also, if Long Lankin's goal in murdering someone is to get blood to treat his malady, why does he seem to have such a need to murder the lady? In most versions of the song, he seems hell-bent on killing her. But if he just needed blood, why not just leave after pricking the baby with a pin and collecting his blood? After all, the baby is an innocent according to the ancient Greek rules. The leper theory doesn't quite make sense to me. I think it makes more sense that the story started as a tale of revenge taken too far, and then turned into a classic boogeyman ghost story as time went on. As Martin Carthy writes, until a few years ago, a mother near Whittle Dean, Northumberland, had but to go outside, shake a bunch of keys, and cry, "There's Long Lankin!" to recall her straying children at nightfall. I'm going to end with a little bit of Frank Proffitt's version of the song Beau Lamkin from 1939, because 'tis the season for scratchy old recordings of Appalachian music. Thank you to Folk Files listener Seth for suggesting Long Lankin as a theme. If you have any theories about the song or any questions about the episode, feel free to send me a message. And remember, beware the moss. Because with a lot of species of moss, stepping on it can damage it permanently, so you just have to be a little careful. Thanks so much for joining in for this episode of Folk Files.
Where is the landlord's lady? Did she go with him? Oh no, said the falconess, she's upstairs sleeping. How will we get her downstairs such a dark night as this? 6 pins and needles and the little baby. Beau Lamkins rocked the cradle and the falconess she sung, while the tears and the red blood from the cradle did run. The lady coming downstairs, not thinking any harm. Old Beau Lamkin stood ready and caught her in his arms. Beau Lamkins, spare my life one day. You can have all the gay gold your horse can carry away. Beau Lamkins, spare my life one hour. You can have my daughter Betsy, my own blooming flower. Keep your daughter Betsy to go through the flood, to square out the silver basin that catches your heart's blood. Daughter Betsy a settin' in the parlor so high, she seen her dear father come riding hard by. Dear father, don't blame me for what's done. Old Beau Lamkins has been here and killed your dear son. Old Beau Lamkins has been here and killed your lady. Beau Lamkins has been here and killed your baby. Beau Lamkins was hung to the scaffold so high, and the falconess was burned.